Dort. This is Lee Dort, and I'm down to dunk. This is Lee Dort, and I'm down to Dort.
I'm Josh Giddey, and I'm down to dunk.
Hey, this is Kenny Hustle, and I'm down to dunk.
I'm Darius Basie, and I'm down to dunk.
I'm Mike Muscala, and I'm down to dunk.
This is Poku, and I'm down to dunk.
I love cereal. Captain Crunch, Cinnamon Toast Crunch, Cracklin Oat Bran.
Oh, I can have these. I'm going to share with my team, but I'm going to hog most of them.
Welcome to Down to Dunk. I'm your host, Andrew Schleck. We're part of the Athletic Podcast Network. With me, very rarely on a Wednesday night, my good friend Alex Spears. Alex, what's up?
What's up, Andrew? Want to apologize up front for the audio quality. I am having to record on my AirPods. The guy who we bought our house from, he didn't have a tape measure, Andrew. Apparently, and he made the worst set of stairs in the world. They're the most dangerous set of stairs I've ever seen, and we're finally getting them replaced, which means I left all of my pod equipment downstairs, and I can't get to it. So that's why I'm having to record like this.
It's trapped. It's trapped. In a cave. This is all.
It is.
All goes back to your cave diving. Your pod equipment.
This is my cave tragedy.
Yes, this is. And we're gonna talk about the end of an era. This is. Do you have any interest in talking about anything else around the NBA before we get started?
Obviously the Robert Sarver stuff came out today, or was that today or yesterday? That was today, right? I don't even know anymore. I
don't know either. I think it was today. I don't know.
I just wanted to give a shout out to Sean Highkin of the Rose Garden Report. He's been on the Slam and Jam before.
Oh, yeah.
I read a lot of the articles, and I just thought his article was very good. And he has like a Patreon, but it's unlocked. I retweeted it. You can go read it.
Mm-hmm.
Just bringing up like how hard it is to get rid of an owner, because that was the consensus on Twitter today. Is like, why didn't they just strip him of his team?
Mm-hmm.
And it's a really hard thing to do, and everyone assumes that that's what happened with Donald Sterling, but it's actually not what happened with Donald Sterling. It was very complicated how they were able to get that team away from him.
Mm-hmm.
It basically involved his wife, Shelley, getting him legally declared mentally incapacitated so that she could get full control of the assets. Then she could sell the team without his permission. She got $2 billion for it. She came away with the official titles of owner emeritus and Clippers #1 fan.
Yep.
She got lifetime courtside seats, parking passes, and will get 3 championship rings. The Clippers ever win the title. This is from Sean's article.
Mm-hmm.
But he's just making the point that, like, as outraged as people rightly are, I mean, no one wants Robert Sarver part of the NBA community right now. It's a really hard thing to get rid of him. And I think that, first of all, Adam Silver did not do a great job today, but the way that Sarver is going to leave the NBA is what has happened since that press conference. Like the fact that LeBron James is coming out, the representative from the Players Association coming out, Chris Paul already said something about it.
Yep.
Like as soon as sponsors start pulling money, like obviously it all comes back to money. Like I do think that Robert Sarver ultimately will not be in control of the Suns. He only has a 35% stake. That kind of surprised me.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize that. He's not even like a majority. I mean, he may be the majority owner, but he doesn't have like this overwhelming control of the Suns. And so I do think that's the way the league will get rid of him, is that you're just going to have uprising of players, agents, people that just don't want to be associated with Robert Sarver anymore. And hopefully he just gets the hint and cashes out. I mean, this is the thing with the stuff like this. These people that are super powerful, like nothing ultimately bad is going to happen to him.
Yeah,
he can do the worst.
He's going to get $1 billion and go home, brother.
Yeah, he can do like the worst things you could think of for a boss to do to his employees, and he just, gets paid out at the end of the day. But I do think he will eventually not be in control of the Suns. And I feel bad for Suns fans because it really felt like this was moving towards like, finally we can break free of this like one anchor on our team that's been holding us back for all these years. If we could just get clear of Robert Sarver, then we can move forward feeling great about our franchise, and not yet. Unfortunately.
Yeah. There's also the reality that he might be the exact guy that would just be like, you know what, I'm gonna own this team forever now. Like I'm gonna dig my heels in. And
Yeah,
like,
and he could, and it would be really hard to like win a court case against him. I mean,
mhm.
if it was super easy, they would have done it with Donald Sterling,
Oh
and
yeah.
it became this huge complicated thing. So clearly, it's not easy. Like Adam Silver has to get the buy-in of all these other owners,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't want to set a precedent where because obviously Robert Sarver isn't the only owner in the NBA who does stuff like this.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be other people, and if that stuff ever comes out, then they're setting a precedent where they're going to lose their team. So that's, I mean, it's that the Donald Sterling thing was such a gift to Adam Silver
Oh,
because
I had the smoking gun. You had the tape. You had the,
do you remember the way people talked about Silver? Because that was only I was looking it up, or no, it was in Sean's article. That was only 3 months after he'd taken over for Donald Sterling.
Mm-hmm.
And he gets like this just golden opportunity, and he's able to come out as the hero when really like that was the only choice
Oh
they could
yeah.
make at that time. And it kind of set him up to be kind of lionized as
Mm-hmm.
a commissioner. And as we've learned over the years, like, Adam Silver's like a lot of other commissioners, like they're working for the owners, as
Mm-hmm.
you'll learn over and over again. And unless the owners want Robert Sarver out, he's probably not going to be leaving anytime soon.
Yeah, I don't think he will be. Yeah, it's pretty wild. With that said, would you do the Zach Lowe trade of Cam Johnson, 4 unprotected picks and 3 pick swaps from the Suns for Shea?
So somebody quote retweeted a tweet I had about how that was going to be the only thing national podcasts were talking about. I did not expect it to come from Zach Lowe.
He's the
Well,
first
people,
one to offer up a fake trade.
I didn't even listen to it because I don't want to listen to those type of things right now. And
It was
I listened.
really quick. It wasn't even like a real discussion point.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it wasn't. It was kind of a throwaway part of the pod.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Well, it's a throwaway trade. I mean, why would OKC ever do that? I mean, I just wish these people who make these trades would. First of all, I'm fine with having the conversation. I'm fine with it. I understand why people want to have the conversation. I'm open to it, but they just ignore like very obvious things. Like you are trading with a team in OKC who already has an excess of future picks, and a lot of those are unprotected or lightly protected. And so, if you're building a package around future picks, like what's the selling point for OKC? Those picks are going to be less valuable than they might be for a team like Utah, who might have been pick neutral before this summer.
Mm-hmm.
And then the idea that once you trade Shea, in this stupid scenario, in this stupid hypothetical, if you traded Shea, you would now have a core where like all of your core players are 22 or under, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And so OKC wants back a 25-year-old who's worse than Shea. Like,
well,
he's none of it makes sense.
Well, he's like one of the least important parts of the trade.
No, I know, but that's my point. Is that like if you actually want to have this conversation and come up with a trade, what would actually make OKC interested? It would have to be a player who is 22 and under, and who can project to be as good as Shea. That's the only way they would ever do a Shea trade.
Mm-hmm.
And so these trades I see like, oh, you could do OG Anunoby and Gary Trent Jr. and some picks. It's like those guys are older than Shea.
Yeah.
Like if they're trading Shea, it's starting over again.
Right.
So yeah,
and the guys that you would bring up, it's just guys that those other teams aren't dealing.
Exactly. Like the guys you would actually.
You're gonna call the Rockets up for Jalen Green? They're probably like,
yeah,
I don't think so.
They wouldn't, and Detroit wouldn't do it for Cade. And
LaMelo. I mean, maybe LaMelo is one.
Yeah, that actually maybe that's probably in the realm. But like Paulo, like Orlando's not trading Paulo.
No, they're not trading Paulo.
So it's a very narrow window, and that's why the conversations you end up realizing that this isn't actually going to happen anytime soon, because there's no possible deal that makes sense unless Shea demanded a trade, and then you deal with that.
Duran and Ivy.
Yeah, like it would have to be something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't think you can just trade for, especially the deals that make me the most mad, Andrew.
Uh-huh.
the fake trade deals that make me the most mad, are when it's a team like Toronto,
Mm-hmm.
where it's like their picks have been in the 20s for years now. And by the way, if you did trade Shea, you were trading a 25-year-old in the first year of like 5-year deal. Like whatever team you're trading him to is expecting to be a playoff team for the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
You are not trading
Siakam,
30.
make him, Siakam, and Scotty Barnes. Like you're in the playoffs for forever now.
Yeah, you're not. This isn't trading, 32-year-old Russ or whatever, or 32-year-old James Harden. Like you're trading a 25-year-old. That team is going to be good. So those picks coming back are not going to be valuable.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Anywho,
especially Shea to the Suns, where it's like Shea and Booker and Ayton.
Yeah, those picks are worthless. I don't want them. Why would you ever want them? You just gave them a young core under 26.
Right. That's your CP3 bridge, like to the future of like, oh, our team's awesome forever now. Thank you. And
thank you. Don't know why you did it.
Yeah, it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense to do that.
Ugh.
So
this is going to be all year, all season.
Yeah. Shea is really good, by the way. Like Shea Gilgeous-Alexander is a really, really good basketball player.
Not good enough. Hoops Hype, Mike Scotto, he interviewed a bunch of executives, had them ranked best players to build around who are under 25. Shea ranked 13th after previously ranking 8th on this list, Andrew.
I saw that.
People think they can just get him for...
He's underrated.
He is underrated.
He
is underrated. And as long as he keeps playing 50 games a year, he will continue to be underrated.
True that. Yeah, I was helping Zach Harper write a piece for The Athletic, and part of it was talking about like, is Shea going to be able to play 70-plus games this year?
Would that be nice?
I said, don't count on it. Don't count on it. All right. Summers of Sam, Volume 8.
Volume 8, Part 2.
Well, we had Volume 7. Now this is part.
So it's really Volume 7, Part 2.
Yeah. Volume 7, Part 2. But we'll call it Volume 8. Let's start where we left off last week.
So
my favorite moments of Michele on the pod. Oh, you have something to say?
Oh, okay, yeah.
There is a team that can put trade package together for us, but surely Alex don't want to hear about them.
Houston?
On, yeah, they can.
Who?
Why would they? No.
Who?
Yeah.
Oh, like we would want CP3 back?
So this is the night of the Paul George trade. We did a emergency pod, and
Kelly nailed it.
Let's think of right. That's not happening. They're not trading to Houston, and they did. Like, was it 2 weeks later?
Yeah. And so the first thing I wanted to bring up is that I don't think we touched on Jeremy Grant last time, and he was traded 3 days after the PG trade.
Yep.
In a deal that, in retrospect, was much more about the luxury tax than any amazing return, because they traded him to Denver for a 2020 first, which was top 10 protected, which eventually became Emmanuel quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So it ended up in the 20s, as we would expect.
Mm-hmm.
But it saved OKC at that time. Now, I don't know what their books looked like after the Russ trade, but at that time, it saved them $39 million in salary and luxury tax.
Well, it was important because Chris Paul and Westbrook's salaries matched dollar for dollar.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So it didn't change their situation.
So it didn't change. So it did save them $39 million.
Yeah.
Because there's a part of you that, knowing how that next season played out, wouldn't have been nice to have Jeremy Grant around with Gallo, Steven Adams.
Isn't he
he
was like the perfect guy to have around for that team? Like just like this, ability forward.
They might, I mean, legitimately, they might beat Houston or finish ahead of Houston in the final standings if Jeremy Grant is on that team. Probably not worth $39 million, but hey, it's not my money. It would have been fun as a fan.
$39 million to go to the second round. Maybe.
Yeah, to play the Lakers in the bubble.
It would have just been really sweet, though, to beat Houston in round one after all of like the hand wringing about trade that we're going to talk about.
Yeah, so that was a big trade, and I don't think anyone loved the trade at the time because we really liked Jeremy Grant, but we also recognize that, and to be fair, like at that time, Presti's probably thinking, I'm about to blow it up completely, like we are about to tank if I'm going to have to trade Russ now.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I'm prioritizing picks. As it turned out, it would take another year. And so I don't know. I never loved that trade, and I think it ended up being a really nice trade for Denver, who ended up losing him for nothing. But
Yeah.
I always liked Jeremy Grant in that role.
So I think also part of it was one, I don't think they knew what kind of season they were going to get out of Chris Paul. They obviously knew that the Chris Paul deal was like on the table, and they didn't know what this team was going to be. I think they thought they were going to be bad. I think they thought that this team could just be putrid and that they get a pick. And
we did.
I did too. Yeah, I thought they'd be horrible.
Yeah.
And then Jeremy Grant would have walked from OKC,
the following year. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So like the idea is like, okay, instead of like letting him, he's going to go, let's just get a pick for him. Let's save a bunch of money. It really is it's a no-brainer trade when you just know the direction that they're going, and then like there's something like psychological about like if this team like went to round 2 and like went to like game 6 or 7 in the second round and then dismantled, it'd be like, okay, like you feel a little cheated, by that fan base. And so I feel like things worked out like the way they were supposed to because the teardown was coming. But if you overachieve and like you have like a shot to go to the West Finals, and then Chris Paul's like, "Yep, the plan is for me to leave. Peace out, Thunder fans." You'd be like, "What? Like, wait a minute, what's going on here? Like, Shea's gonna get better next year, right? Like, what are we doing?" So I just feel like the road they were heading down, it was like almost like it was great. You get to 7 games in round 1. Something, Westbrook and Paul George never did.
I know. I was going to say that would have complicated Russ's legacy a little bit. If like immediately after he leaves, after 3 first-round exits, they like do better in the playoffs with this team that wasn't supposed to be good.
Yeah.
So you kind of preserve the legacy a little bit. So before we get to the actual deal, I wanted to talk about what was going on with Chris Paul in the run-up to this trade.
Mm-hmm.
So Vincent Goodwill had reported that CP3 demanded a trade and that Harden told the front office to choose between them after losing to the Warriors. He described the relationship as unsalvageable. And then Kevin O'Connor afterwards said, I had heard prior to all this happening, the Westbrook trade, that Harden may have gone as far as to request a trade from the Rockets if Chris Paul wasn't traded. That's how far their discontent with each other went. And then, of course, what I remember is Daryl Morey like vociferously denying all of these rumors and allegations. Jonathan Fagan, who's a beat writer in Houston, tweeted out, a thoroughly exasperated Daryl Morey said Chris Paul and his reps have never asked to trade him, and he will be on the Rockets next season. Said he and Harden do not have issues with one another, and that he has spoken to both this offseason about free agency evaluations and plans. Zach Lowe, quote, retweeted that, said, just spoke to Daryl Morey. He reiterated, there's been no trade demand from Chris Paul. Tweet that I said that. Print it, tweet it twice. Which is so funny because obviously there were issues.
It's so funny
between those two.
These GMs that like communicate, like that through the media. Because I'm just like thinking about Danny Ainge this summer and how he told Tony Jones, like, yeah, I'm not trading Donovan Mitchell. Like he told him that.
Yeah.
And so it's just like, man, it's just funny to think about that, with like the choices that like GMs make, like, okay, I'm going to directly communicate. Then it's like, okay, then now what do we believe? That's where I think Sam, like, I think some people are frustrated Sam doesn't like talk like that, to media members. But at the same time, you have to find yourself in situations where like I'm bluffing right now. Like I have to bluff because if I don't, like things get bad really fast.
Yeah, I mean, it's not worth it for him to come out and say, "Oh yeah, it's terrible between them. Like we have to we have to get rid of one of
Yeah.
them this summer."
Yeah, this ain't gonna work out, guys. It ain't gonna work out for us. It's just it's just a weird position to be in as a general manager because you either stay silent and work the back channels, or you're just bluffing. And like
The other thing
I wanted to see how these guys do it.
The other thing I wanted to bring up was, obviously, we all know that Chris Paul's contract at that time was seen very negatively.
Yeah.
Like, Tillman obviously had the quote about it being one of the worst contracts he'd seen in business or sports.
Yeah.
What I found interesting though is I found 2 articles from that summer or in like the second half of that season ranking the worst contracts in the league at that time. Both articles had Westbrook and CP3 in the worst 3 contracts, and both had Russ ranked as worse than CP3.
Just because of the year.
Yeah, but like at that time, I was not thinking like obviously it's a huge contract, but I was not thinking of it as like this terrible albatross burdensome contract because there were guys like John Wall who at that time still, was injured. And so like that was a contract that was, oh, that's so obviously worse than Westbrook. Like that deal, as bad as it apparently was in 2019, how it was viewed, it got significantly worse over the next couple seasons.
Yeah. I guess it just goes to show that whoever wrote that article was right.
I know. I nailed it. Oh, that's actually. Oh, let me see if I can.
We would have railed against it at the time because I think that we still had this like
okay
about Russ.
So I found. So there's this Reddit advanced search website where you can like search a subreddit over a certain period of time, and I found this Reddit post. The only title was "Our Boys Killed Zach Lowe and Howard Beck's Argument That Russ is a Negative Asset. Zach is a douchebag loser that shouldn't be covering the NBA." And I was like, well, that's really funny. I wonder who they're talking about. I clicked on the link and it was a link to one of our podcasts. It was a link to the Wednesday pod talking about Zach Lowe. Now, to be clear, we did not call Zach a douchebag loser. This person did. But we were
that. Yeah.
We were fighting back against the characterization of Russ as a negative asset, which in this deal he was not. But I think if this deal didn't exist,
to our
credit. Yeah. But to be fair, like, and Zach Lowe said this when the deal went down in his like recap of the deal, was like, this was more than I thought anyone would ever be willing to give up for Westbrook. Like, I don't think there was another deal like this out there. And we've talked about this before. It was really like a perfect storm for OKC and how this worked out.
Oh, and the same is true for the Paul George deal. There was not going to be another trade like that because everybody always talks about how like they didn't only get PG, they got Kawhi too, so they were willing to give up everything.
Yeah,
Sam wanted because of that, and
it's hard not to look at this deal and say like Houston had to get rid of Chris Paul, like based on what they gave up.
Yes, and it was a deal that both Westbrook and Harden wanted, which probably made Morey feel better about making the trade.
Yeah.
Just because he knew that they would both be amenable to whatever. And it's just funny seeing how that Rockets year shaped up. And it's a precursor to what the rest of Westbrook's career was going to be. It was, we couldn't get Russ to change, so we had to change everything because of Russ.
And to be fair to them, like that, what they did was what I had wanted to see for Russ. Like, it's something that you would do in NBA 2K just to see if it worked. And credit to them for doing it. And it largely did work when they finally traded Capella in that second half of that season. Then he gets injured. And so you don't like really get to see what it would have looked like, though there were a lot of people saying in the run up to those playoffs, like how exhausting that style of play was for guys like PJ Tucker and some of the guys who are having to play up in the lineup.
Oh,
But I respected Houston for doing what they did, like actually trying to make it work, as opposed to like LA trading for him and just expecting what I don't know, like not changing anything, actually making it worse. Like, let's see how bad of a fit we can get around Russ and just expect his superstardom to like take over.
yeah. And I also think Morey knew that there was an expiration date on this team as well and on his
Yeah.
time with the Rockets. So it was like, all right, let's just try it. It may not be like the long-term sustainable option for us, but like, heck, I don't know. Let's just try it. Let's just see.
So before I mention the actual details of the trade, so after the Paul George trade, Woj's first tweet about Russ wanting out named Miami
I
as
know.
an interested team. And in the run up to this trade, that was really the only team we were seriously talking about, because it just seems so obvious, like Russ going to Miami with Jimmy Butler. I mean, it all kind of
The
made
Vice
sense.
City jerseys, like they're just gonna look like so cool. It was a team that we felt like we could root for. It's like, oh, this is perfect. What a great transition for us.
And the Miami Herald reported that there were trade discussions, and OKC asked Miami to include 2 of Tyler Hero, Bam Adebayo, and Justice Winslow. Which obviously, if you get Bam in that deal, even if it's Bam and Justice Winslow, like that ends up being like a really good trade for Russell Westbrook. But they were never going to do that. I think realistically, like maybe they would have done Tyler Hero and Justice Winslow, which we'll have to see how what turns out with these.
That might end up being the better deal.
It could be. It could be.
Happens with these picks, but I would still bet on the pick. I would bet on the picks rather than on Hero at this point.
And it was just funny to see Justice Winslow's name. I mean, that was only a couple years ago, and he was thought of really highly. I mean, Memphis kind of, really made a big trade to get him, thinking like, oh, this is an undervalued guy, and we can plug him into our lineup, and he can be our big wing of the future. And it just didn't work out. And maybe it will work out now in Portland.
Who knows?
We will see. Now, Brett Dawson and Sam Amick at The Athletic, they listed Miami, Houston, and Detroit as suitors for Westbrook in trade discussions. So those were really like the 3 teams that you heard. Detroit would have been like an all-time. I mean, as bad as it got for Westbrook, with going to having to be traded like 4 times in 4 years or whatever it was, going to Detroit with breaking down Blake Griffin would have truly been like the worst timeline.
It would have been really sad.
Very, very bad. Because they probably would have been a lottery team quickly.
Yeah. Yeah.
At least Houston was still like a good team. And even Washington, had Bradley Beal, were still like a solid team. If he goes to Detroit and Blake Griffin, basically his career ends that like next year, that would have been an awful situation.
It would have been great for the Thunder if you have Detroit's picks, though.
Oh my gosh.
You get Sekou Demboya and the Pistons picks?
Yes, Sekou Demboya.
Let's go.
We would have talked ourselves into Sekou very quickly.
Yeah.
So the actual
Sekou and Poku.
Sekou and Poku. So the actual deal traded Russ to Houston for CP3, a 2021 Houston swap, which did not convey, as we all know, a 24 and 26 Houston first, both of which are top 4 protected, and then a 25 Houston swap, which is top 10 protected.
Yep.
And I'm still feeling, there's picks I like more at this point, but that 24 Houston, I'm feeling okay about it because I do think we know they're going to have a lot of cap space next summer. I think that Tillman is going to be itching to put a like functional basketball team back on the court.
Oh yeah.
And they definitely seem like the type of team who would want to go out and acquire some veterans and try to make a push just for competency next year. I don't know if they have for a franchise that, as we've talked about before, like this is their worst like season-long streak of being bad in their franchise's history. Like this is very abnormal for the Houston Rockets. They seem like they have less of an appetite for pushing this another year. Now it might happen just because they're bad.
Yeah.
But I think they seem like the type of franchise who will do what they can to be relevant next year.
Yeah, I would agree. This next draft is going to be a big one for them with regards to that pick and the trajectory of the team. If they get like the 5th pick, I don't know how you'd feel. If they get number 1, you feel great. You know, it's just, I don't know. They need some things to go right for them to be able to avoid these picks like being like catastrophic for them, you know?
Yeah. So I want to talk about some things that happened after the trade, which this I truly did not remember.
Videos first.
Oh yeah. Show the videos.
So I've got one that is Bill Simmons' reaction, and then I've got just like the Royce Young report. So we'll start with Royce.
What were the things that led to getting rid of Russell Westbrook? That's a monumental deal.
Yeah, it's kind of it's an awkward timeline of events, Kenny, that led to the Thunder trading their franchise player, the guy that has spent 11 years in Oklahoma City. And it really started back with Paul George's trade request. Obviously, everything changed at that moment. The timetable for the Thunder, the outlook for the upcoming season, and really Russell Westbrook's perspective as well. And one thing that sources have told me, Kenny, is that when Paul George put that request in with the Thunder, Russell Westbrook didn't try to change his mind. He was basically understanding of the situation and understood that essentially that meant that gave him a ticket out as well, because in some ways this was a mutual agreement. The Thunder wanted to accommodate Westbrook, get him to the team that he wanted to play for, which was very definitively the Houston Rockets. Westbrook wanted to pair back up with former teammate James Harden, and the Thunder wanted to get him there, and they understood that with Paul George gone and the outlook for the team in a different place, it was time to start the rebuild, and Russell Westbrook just really didn't fit that type of timeline for this Thunder team. So it became very obvious for both sides. They were motivated to get it done, and both the Thunder and Russell Westbrook and his representation made it happen.
You mentioned the 11 years, the longest tenured active player with the same team. Remember, he was selected actually by the Sonics, then moved with the team when they moved for that next season. What will be his legacy in Oklahoma City?
Well, he's obviously the first guy that's going to have a statue out in front of the arena. He's not the first guy to have his jersey retired. Nick Collison got that honor last season, but Westbrook will certainly have that, Kenny. He is the Thunder in so many ways, and in a lot of ways he also represents this era. The highs, the lows, the drama, the injuries, everything that the Thunder kind of went through, the ups and downs and everything that they've experienced, it kind of embodies Russell Westbrook, right? I mean, the guy is one of the most dramatic, emotional, passionate, intense players, and this decade of Thunder basketball was one of the most intense periods that we've seen in the NBA with everything that happened around them. So he will be remembered very fondly by Thunder fans. He's an all-time player, an all-time great, and while it's an awkward ending for Russell Westbrook to go to the Houston Rockets and rejoin James Harden, it's also one that I think that fans will look back on and understand that it was necessary for both sides to part ways.
Thanks for watching ESPN.
So I just remembered thinking like, man, it was just such a weird few weeks, because I mean, if you were to tell yourself like 3 weeks prior to that moment, like, you know what, Russell Westbrook, if somebody like came on a show and was like, hey, I think Russell Westbrook wants to go to the Rockets, like I think everybody would just be like, what? Especially like Oklahoma City fans, just be like, what in the world is going on here? And then like it happens, and the reporting, which was accurate, it's like Russell Westbrook wanted to go to Houston. That just was like it was one of the bigger like gut punches. And it's like, man, like it's like, Sam, this better work out, because if he goes to Houston and there's like a big success there, I don't know. I think at the time we were just like, oh my gosh, did Sam just like hand Daryl Morey like this like get out of jail free card with like getting rid of Chris Paul, getting a player that we think is better in Russ, because that was the narrative. Everybody thought that, including Bill Simmons here. Like, listen, like Bill thought he was better than Chris Paul too.
I made the case like, look, Daryl likes stars. If he feels like Westbrook is a better star than Chris Paul, he's going to make a move on him. I just assumed it would be like a straight up deal and maybe there was like one first rounder thrown in. Houston paid a pretty big price here to get the worst contract in the league, or one of the 3 worst contracts in the league. Sorry. If you, Westbrook, here's what he has left. 38.5 million, 41.3 million, 44.2 million, 47 million. All right.
So it's just interesting to listen back to some of this stuff, just because people did think that Russ was the better player, but I think people were also a little shocked by the trade itself, that the Thunder were able to get picks. I think from our standpoint, it did feel like, oh man, like this Russ Harden thing could like really work. Like this could really work, and this could really backfire on Sam all over again with Houston.
But it kind of makes you wonder, like, what did Sam really think about Russ at that point in 2019?
I think it tells you quite a bit.
Because if he felt the same way that we did, he probably doesn't make that trade. Or I don't know, is
if he thinks this is the best trade, I think he makes it either way.
Yeah.
You know, but yeah.
So after the deal happens, Caesars, the sportsbook, had Houston with the 4th best odds to win the championship. 538. 538. The stat nerds, Andrew, they projected the playoff standings after the Russ trade. Rockets were number 1 in the West with a 24% chance of winning the title. You never see percentages that high until you get like later in the season, and even then, like a 1 in 4 chance they were going to win the West, which blew my mind. And it was true, because I went back and listened to our podcast that we did, and I brought it up on that podcast. I was shocked then too, just because, I mean, like for years we had heard how Westbrook was, like an anti-stats darling, like anyone within the any of the stats nerds, they usually did not like Russ because he was so inefficient. So the idea that you add him and all of a sudden they're the number 1 team with a 24% chance of winning the title, I to this day I don't understand.
No, it didn't make any sense. And then for the Thunder, it felt, I think my immediate thought when Chris Paul was a member of the Thunder, my immediate thought was, how do we get this guy out of here?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So the Ringer did like a winners and losers of that trade.
Mm-hmm.
It's very fun to look back at it because they're basically all wrong based on how you would grade it today, and not to take shots at this article, because I think it is just reflecting what the common wisdom at that time was. They had Chris Paul as a loser, which, like, Chris Paul has come out the best out of all 3 of these guys. Like, he made it to an NBA Finals.
Yeah, it changed his whole career.
Like, since that trade, Harden has been on 3 teams
Mm-hmm.
with the Rockets, Nets, and Sixers. Westbrook has been on the Rockets, Wizards, and Lakers, and potentially a 4th team.
Yep.
And Chris Paul took a team to the playoffs that wasn't supposed to make the playoffs, and then ended up in the NBA Finals. So I would say he's definitely the winner. Russell Westbrook was a winner, which I would say, halfway through that first year, you could maybe say, okay, finally he's on a team that is like completely upended everything to try to make this work for him. He was becoming much more efficient, but long term, like, that trade was not good for Russ. Although to be fair, like, I don't know what trade would have been good for Russ. I mean, maybe if he ends up in Miami, just because Spo is such a good coach, they like figure something out.
No, I don't. I just think that Russ hit a point in his career that he just couldn't do it anymore. Like, he just couldn't be the guy anymore. And I mean, we all made this argument. If anybody's going to get him to become a role player in this league, it's going to be LeBron. And not even LeBron could do it. You know? And so, honestly, the Wizards situation is probably the best one for him because there's no crazy achievement expected.
No crazy fan base.
No crazy fan base, no fans. And just like they made the playoffs, great. Like Wizards fans are still like, yeah, bring him back. That was cool. You know? Like he needs that kind of situation where they're just like, yeah, take the team. You have the team. You can have it. But when it comes to like winning big, I think like that ship is kind of sailed.
So 2 other winners, according to the Ringer, Mike D'Antoni, who was out of a job within a year and has never come back to coaching. I mean, he was an assistant coach in Brooklyn, but has not been a head coach since. And Daryl Morey, who also was gone within a year.
Mm-hmm.
Though he kind of did win in a way because by making this trade, he blew up everything and was able to get out of Houston and get with what most people would say is a much better ownership group and with younger players.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, now he has like Embiid and Maxey, and obviously now he has Harden. There's still issues with the Sixers, but I think he got into a much better situation.
Yeah.
Because of this bad trade. The one that was correct, though, they did have Sam Presti as a winner, which I would agree.
Okay.
That Sam Presti was a winner. Now, listen to this, because, you know, we're doing Summers of Sam, and we've talked about the 2016 with KD and how, KD had said all this stuff. You know, he said he was going to be here forever or whatever. I don't know what he said. Harden, after this trade, he bought a $15 million stake in Houston's MLS team, the Dynamo. And his quote was, "It was time. I'm invested. This is my city, and I'm here to stay. I know I need to bring a championship in basketball, and I will. That's coming very, very soon. I'm a part of this city, and I am here forever." I just thought that was funny because these guys say stuff like this all the time, and it's probably best that we just ignore it. That's why, like, as much as I don't want to entertain any Shea trade ideas, I also don't want to continually go back to the same Instagram post where he said home and act like it's like some he said home, so that means he wants to be here forever.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way it's going to be. Like we did the same thing with KD, so I'm not going to do that.
Yeah,
but I'm also going to continue to shoot down bad Shea trades.
Yeah.
You said, so the podcast that we did, you said that Ben Golliver, his immediate reaction to the trade was, "This is the end of Harden in Houston," which is pretty good.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
Yeah, that is really good. And a part of that came from just Ben not being a Westbrook believer, the past few years. And he was right. I mean, that's what it led to. And I know some of this stuff is hard to digest as if you're like a big Westbrook fan, Like this is just part of Russ being Russ. Let Russ be Russ. Is you get situations like this. You also had incredible situations in 2012 where you make the NBA Finals, where in 2016 you get as close to making the NBA Finals as possible because you let Russ be Russ. But when things start to fall apart and you continue to let Russ be Russ, this is what happens. The stuff that's going on in LA, this is what happens. I mean, it's just a part of it. It's just all a part of the ride.
It is definitely a part of the ride, and you'll feel much better about all this in a decade because the later years of his career will kind of fade away. He'll come back to OKC, they'll retire his jersey, and it'll all just feel great. Yes. I'm an Iverson fan. I do not think about the Grizzlies years. I do not think about the Pistons years or even really the Nuggets years, to be fair, and they were actually fine.
They were good. Yeah.
Yeah. So we had a podcast, and I said the top 5 things to hate about the Westbrook trade. I had a list. I just wanted to read them out because reading it back, I realized this was mostly I didn't actually hate the trade that much. So the top 5 ones. Number 5, Presti bailed out Morey again, which, as we talked about, if they had been good, this would have been the case because Morey, as we've talked about, was in a tough spot again. now with Chris Paul, like this contract nobody wanted, and if he had been able to get off of that contract and then start like a new run with Westbrook and Harden, that would have been bad.
It would have
That
been
would have been
bad.
real bad.
Think about how good it would have been for Houston if they would have just kept Chris Paul and he went on this plant-based diet and he was as good as he was. Like they could have been the best team in the West again.
Probably. I almost feel like so much of that of Chris Paul's like regeneration was like him hitting rock bottom, which was getting traded to OKC and like wanting to prove everyone wrong.
Yeah.
And maybe that happens in Houston, but I do think that was like a huge career shift for CP3.
Yeah. And the Thunder had a plan for Chris that changed because they're like, yeah, we're going to sit you in these pockets of the season. And, Chris is like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm going to get my career back on track.
My number 4 reason was that the trade forced me to realize that a lot of OKC fans are more Russ fans than OKC fans. Which
true for some still.
Yeah, I went back and read the original Reddit post of the trade and the comments. There were so many comments about becoming Rockets fans, rooting for the Rockets. And I remember that summer, that being like my major point of disagreement with a lot of people is I refused that I wanted the Houston Rockets to fail. I did not care that Russell Westbrook was on the team. I was not going to change my position on hating the Rockets just because Russ was on that team. And I stand by that to this day.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Number 3 reason was CP3's contract, which we've talked about. I mean, we were really worried about, are we going to get anything for this? I was willing to give up a pick if I could just get off of this contract.
Had so many picks, it was like, all right, can we get this show on the road? Let's get rid of this guy.
And then the number 1 reason was the pro-Russ sentiments from national media, which basically the idea, which I mean, I kind of explained it with 538, but all of a sudden, like people were looking on the bright side of Russ, whereas previously it was always like, glass half empty. Now it was glass half full. Like, oh, you know what? Russ is pretty good. I mean, he does add some dynamism to the Houston Rockets, and people obviously were talking them up. I mean, really thought. I mean, the betting odds had them 4th to win the title. So people were hyped on this pairing, even if they had questions about it.
Best rebounding guard in the history of the NBA.
That's true. Still true.
Yeah.
So anything else before I move on to kind of like post trade? What do we do with CP3?
No, I mean, it was a really crazy way to end the era. Like it felt so abrupt because 1 week we're talking about Alec Burks and like what he can be.
Yeah.
And then in like 3 weeks later, it's like, oh, like how Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, am I even saying his name right? Like that's where we were. I mean, it was so abrupt but it was, looking back, the way that Sam executed it was to perfection. Because the amount of assets that they got out of that whole thing, and this is just the beginning, of what is to come for this team. Unbelievable that you get Shea and all those picks, and you get Russ traded for a player that's going to help you and bring one of the more enjoyable seasons in a long time to Oklahoma City too. In the middle
for sure.
of making all, I mean, it was. I don't think that it could have gone much better in the event that your player wants out, because a lot of teams, whenever their best players want out, it's like, oh man, it's like total destruction. I mean, I think about Cleveland. The first time around, they just got lucky that they got Kyrie, but like think about some of the other guys that had, like Tristan Thompson was like a nice player for that team, but Tristan Thompson was like a top 5 pick. Like that's not what you want. Like they drafted Dion. I love Dion. They ended up trading Dion for like a bad first round pick.
Yeah,
it was like total annihilation of the franchise, and to think that like Kevin wanted out summer 2016, and then Russ wants out summer 2019 with newly re-signed Paul George. It's like, oh man. But the amount of stuff you got, the fact that they were able to get Shea remains such a big deal that I think we're going to look back and like Shea is going to be like one of the, I think he'll play here for a long time. I think he's going to be like, you look back and it's like, yeah, it's like, Kevin and Russ and those guys. I think Shea's going to be pretty high on that list.
Careful, Andrew. I hope we don't come back to this podcast and clip that.
Summers of Sam 2030. Yeah. No, I really do. I think that if he wasn't bought into the vision of what this franchise wants, like he'd be gone already. I mean, the time to trade him was before he signed this 5-year max deal,
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I'm just always reminded that things change, people change. I do believe that Kevin Durant, the things he said back when he said them, he did believe them. I don't think he was lying.
Yeah, but Kevin, this is Shea's 3rd season with the Thunder.
Yeah.
He's got 5 more. Like if he just plays out this contract just the same the way that Kevin did.
Yeah, for sure.
That's a long time still. And if he wants to go somewhere else, like that'll be up to him. But if the plan works the way that Sam and his team hope that it does, you're going to be a team that's like in the mix. So, I mean, that's like the plan. I think Shea's a big part of it. And getting Shea in that Paul George deal to me is just, it is one of those franchise changing moments. I didn't know Shea was this good. Like when we're talking about, I don't know how much we talked about Shea that summer. I don't think that we really even knew how to talk about him. We talk about the playoff series and how he played really well. I don't think that we'd have ever thought like, hey, this guy's going to be leading the league in drives and he's going to be one of the more unique guards in the league. And I mean, I just don't think that we thought that. And I don't think we thought he was a point guard even at the time. There was just
for sure.
So much to learn about him that we just had no clue. And even, I mean, I would say like if you give the Thunder truth serum, like did they think that Shea had a legit chance to be what he is today? I'm sure they're like, yeah, there's a shot that he becomes a really good player, but like we liked him. We liked the season that he had, but what he has become in a pretty short amount of time is pretty unbelievable. Like if it was just SGA for Paul George, like that's a fair trade in itself, just because of the age difference.
Yeah, and because of games played and last year's shooting issues at the beginning of the season, it still feels like there's significant ceiling left. Like,
without doubt.
He is not just like, I mean, he was a 25, 5, and 6 guy last year, which like that. I mean, just basic stats. That's like really good.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I used to love guys who were 25, 5, and 5 growing up. Like, it was because of fantasy, but like I was always attracted to guys who could do that.
Yeah.
And it was like guys like Brandon Roy. Like I loved Brandon Roy because of that.
Mm-hmm.
And Shea is already there, and there's clear things that he could get better at.
Mm-hmm.
One being his shooting, and 2 just being like if he just put up those stats over a full season, playing like 70 plus games, like all of a sudden people will have to talk about him in end of year discussions, even if it's just like as an honorable mention. Like they would have to talk about him at some point.
Yeah, no doubt. And with the trade now, as you counted up, it's Shea, it's J-Dub, it's Trey Mann. And it doesn't stop there yet, but if it did stop there, you'd be like, yeah, that's a great deal. That's a great deal for the Thunder. Like they really cashed in on Paul George, but like there's more incoming, with that trade. And it's pretty crazy to think about. We don't even know what Trey Mann and J-Dub could be. Maybe they're not players that are on this team, when they make their run, but there's a chance that like one or both those guys are, and that they're significant pieces. There's at least a shot.
So just quickly, I wanted to mention, So after the trade is made, we're talking about trading Chris Paul to the Miami Heat again.
Yep.
Talking about the Heat again.
Yep.
Brian Windhorst reported at that time, Chris Paul's preference was to get traded to Miami Heat, but Miami wants their 2021 and 2023 first-round picks back from OKC in any deal for Chris Paul. So you'd have to give up 2 picks just to get off of the contract. Which honestly, at that time, I mean, I was willing to give up 1 pick. I think I was saying I'd be willing to give up the Denver pick that we got in the Jeremy Grant deal.
Mhm.
But yeah, obviously Presti was never going to do that. And as we'll talk about next week, it turned out really well. Steve Kyler, he tweeted out, having talked with a few GMs, there is almost no appetite for the final year of CP3's deal, which is so funny because he opted out of it. My understanding is the Thunder may have to shovel over several picks to get a team to look at that cap hit. Today, I think he starts the season in OKC. And then I just wanted to read this quote from Chris in the Undefeated. He was interviewed there, asked about his initial reaction to the trade. He said, "My initial reaction," Paul said with a laugh, "I was shocked. Truth be told, I had just talked to Daryl a couple days before the trade, and he said he wasn't going to trade me to Oklahoma City. That's funny because that is going to be the alert that pops up on everybody's phone because nobody knows that. But what the hell? I just said it." Morey declined comment on Paul, saying he was told he would have been traded to the Thunder, but sources close to the Rockets say Morey told Paul days before the trade there was a slim chance he could be dealt to the Thunder and that the message may have been misinterpreted. It's just like things worked out so well for Chris Paul. I mean, he must have. I mean, we love Oklahoma City. We love the Thunder. But for him at that stage of his career, I mean, they were coming off 2 seasons where they were challenging the Warriors, at least in that one series where they went to Game 7.
The Warriors just fell apart.
Yes. And for him to go from that to then get traded to Oklahoma City, a team that is blowing up. Like they just traded Paul George, they just traded Jeremy Grant, now they're trading Russ.
Yep.
And he's going to that team. He must have wondered, like, am I actually ever going to get out of this situation? Like, is this he must have wondered, is my career going to end here? And for it to turn around the way it did, and credit to him because he made huge changes in his life to get to that point. But it's amazing how that turned for him to where he, out of like Harden and Russ and Chris Paul, has come out the best of those 3 guys from this deal.
Yeah, and you think about just what a missed opportunity it was for a lot of franchises.
Oh my gosh! Like you mean trading for him the next year when the Suns did? Because even then, there were Suns fans who did not want to make that deal because people still felt that way about Chris Paul, even though I mean he was an All-Star with OKC, right?
He was awesome.
I'm remembering that right. He was very good. Took the team to the playoffs, and there were still a lot of franchises who were like, okay, but now he's another year older, and I still don't want to be on the back end of that deal.
Yeah, I think about Philly.
Yeah, Philly, that would have helped
a
lot because he could have played off of Ben Simmons as he showed in that year. Well, he showed it with Harden, but he also showed it in the 3-guard lineup with OKC.
I know
he would have been a great fit.
Yeah, it would have solved a lot of problems for Philly if they would have done that trade, and given up whatever it took to get him. And if you could like rewind it and just be like, hey, everybody gets a redo on this. One, you get a lot more than what they got,
For sure. And there would have been a lot of other teams who would have been interested.
There would have been a ton of suitors for him.
I mean, Miami, who eventually went for Kyle Lowry like a year or 2 later, like that would have made a lot of sense in retrospect for that team.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, they made it to the NBA Finals with him.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just crazy to think about. And now they're having like some big time issues in Phoenix, but like, I don't know. Yeah, I think if you would have told Phoenix, like, hey, you're going to have a run to the finals and then everything's going to fall apart, would you still do it? Like, yeah, of course you'd still do it. I mean, it's a no-brainer. I mean, it's an absolute no-brainer for Phoenix to have gone through with that. So it's just, it is wild how many things changed from that summer up until now, and like the Chris Paul narrative, and we'll talk more about it next week, is just it's a wild one, man. It was, I mean, at the time I was so bummed out. I thought we should just trade him to any team that would just give us like 2 salaries that could just break up his contract. Like that's what we thought of him.
Kind of like the Porzingis deal that Dallas did.
Yeah. I think I would have been very satisfied with a deal like that. You know, and at the time we're like, we're not going to win anyways, so just get like 2 guys. I remember even thinking like if we could just trade him, and I think Myers Leonard was like going to be a part of the package, which Myers actually briefly
that was true
under for like a couple hours or whatever. But yeah, I remember just thinking like, yeah, whatever. I don't care who the players are. It actually doesn't even matter who the players are. I don't even care about getting a pick for him. And Thunder did get a pick for him, but ended up not mattering all that much. But it's just it's an incredible deal for the Thunder. I don't know that it's a deal that, you know, at the time that the Thunder are thinking that, oh, we'll have a gap year. We'll see how it goes. You know, I doubt that they thought that, but it ended up, and we'll talk about it next week, being one of like the more magical Thunder seasons that we've had. It was so fun.
Yeah, and I think, you know, if they had been able to tank that first year, in 2020, it's kind of nice in retrospect that it took another year, because you look at that top of that draft. Obviously, Anthony Edwards, you know, very excited about him. You're excited about LaMelo. But, you know, if you end up with like a James Wiseman as your first pick of this new rebuild, or Patrick Williams or Isaac Okoro, like that next year, 21, is just so much more loaded.
Mm-hmm.
Going back to like pick 8 with like, I mean, Franz Wagner. It's just such a more loaded draft. And so it kind of worked out timing wise, even though we were so excited to be tanking at the time, like going into that Chris Paul season when we thought they were going to be bad.
Yeah, 5 through 10 in 2020. Okoro, Okongwu, and I like Okongwu, but like he's dealt with so many injuries. Killian Hayes, Obi Toppin, Denny Avdia, Jalen Smith, who had already had his option declined. You know, I mean, that's a wild one. Like, how many other guys have had their options declined? It's not very many in the top 10. It's just not. There's just nobody. You know, Kevin Knox just got a new contract, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's just is crazy to think about. But yeah, had they got like the number 1 pick, that'd be pretty cool. But yeah, otherwise not so great.
And I bet they would have taken LaMelo. That would be my guess. But
yeah, he fits the mold of this current Thunder iteration, like great passer, like understands how to play the game very well. Cool guy, you know.
Cool guy. Now, Andrew, before we give our grades, there's one more piece of news that happened this summer. Oklahoma City, this is Woj speaking. Oklahoma City and forward Patrick Patterson have agreed to a buyout on the final season of his contract, allowing him to become a free agent. So now that you know that, what would you give 2019 as a grade?
From the moment that, and I guess it was Russ that won it out first, which is what Ramona Shelburne reported. That Russ won it out.
After the season. Yeah.
Yep. And that Paul was just basically given like the first out. This is an like A+. You know, this is a grand slam for Presti. Like it doesn't get. It's difficult to get much better than this when it's time for everything to be over. Like to get all of this in return, and to basically get the same season, maybe even better season, plus all the assets, plus Shea. Because if they had just kept everything together, they probably get a season very similar to the one they're about to get.
Yeah.
And so you get, okay, great. You can have that same kind of season where you go compete in the first round and you're done. Plus, you get a cajillion picks. You get Shea. Like, it just doesn't. I just don't know how you could have done better. I mean, there were some rough years in there for Sam. But like, this is the year that shows like, okay, like he's got it. Like, he's still got it. I know he showed that with getting Paul George and all that, but like, this was one where you're like, oh, okay. Like, I really do feel like I can trust him with like the future of this franchise kind of, moves.
Well, the worst thing in this summer, and relatively speaking, was drafting Darius Baisley at 21 or 23, I guess, just because we liked some of the guys around there. But at the same time, then they get Lou Dort as an as an unsigned rookie or undrafted rookie.
Yeah.
And so it's like, well, like the Baisley thing in retrospect, it's just like it's a speck of on this like amazing thing that Sam Presti created that summer. I mean, it was everything.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a pick in the 20s. And honestly, like, still like a worthwhile gamble, even though we know
for sure.
All that we know about Bays is like, okay. And we still don't know ultimately what Darius will be. I think we have a good idea. I feel like I have like an 80% of an idea of what he'll be, But like, there's
and that
margin of like, I don't know, like still something could work out for him where like the shooting from the corner just clicks and it's like, oh, okay, now he's like a very helpful player.
And that's why I said relatively, because we've talked about some of these other picks in the 20s. Like, he's a better pick than Josh Eustace. He's a better pick than Mitch McGarry. Like, he's probably a better pick than Terrence Ferguson.
Definitely better than Berg. Yeah.
So like, relatively speaking, like Presti's made way worse picks in the 20s. So it was the worst thing of this summer, but it actually it was fine.
So yeah, it's like a whatever. It's like a B or a C plus,
And it's definitely not bringing down an A plus for this summer. I mean, I think this is like the clearest A plus of any of the ones that we've discussed.
Yeah, I don't think it's really debatable whether this is. I mean, this is one of his greatest summers. Yeah, it doesn't.
The greatest summer
does not get much better than this one. Hopefully, there'll be better ones in the future. 2024, I've got some high hopes.
Oh, 2 years from now. Okay, great.
Well, that's where the Houston pick that Houston pick could come into play, and
that's also,
and you're hoping that they're good, because that's when things get like could get really like out of control. Good is if they're like, oh, this team is pretty good, and we get like the 9th pick to either.
Oh my gosh, if they better be good.
Right?
If they're not good,
I think they'll be at least middle of the road by then. Because I think by then they're not. I don't think you're doing the Kalitzakis tanking at the end of the season.
We can't be middle of the road, Andrew. We have to arrive.
I know. I'm just saying that at worst they'll be middle of the road is what I'm saying.
And that would be the worst.
That would be the very worst thing.
Better not happen.
Thanks so much for listening to our show. We appreciate you guys tuning in on YouTube. If you have not subscribed to our YouTube channel, do that. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the little bell so that you will know when we go live, because we do all these podcasts live on YouTube. Hope you guys have a great rest of your night. We'll be back again on Friday with the Fry Pod crew. Also, keep your ear to the ground on some Down to Dunk events coming your way once the season gets underway. Down to Dunk Night, which we had last year at the arena with the Thunder, is we're starting to plan for that again. So it was a great time. We had a winner shoot a half-court shot and get courtside seats to a future Thunder game. You could do that too. So ear to the ground on that one. Hope you guys have a great rest of your night. And we'll talk to you guys again on Friday.